Welcome back. Today is Wednesday, the 7th of June, 2023. This is day 3 of assembly sealing week of the fuel tanks. Yesterday, all of the skin stiffeners were attached, riveted on, slopped up, and everything like that. We're going to get to working on the slop on the 5 interior ribs for one fuel tank today. Not really sure yet how it's going to pan out in terms of breaking out the work across those number of ribs. I think that my plan for now is just to mix up enough sealant for one rib and see how long it takes me to complete one rib to decide if I can maybe go for 2 at a time or something like that. Anyways, we'll see how it goes. Thanks for being here. It's almost noon already, so it's nice and toasty. It's still going to be a fun day anyways, so let's just get after it. Build an airplane. The total for this day was just over 6 hours. This first part is simply getting ready to get ready, re-cleaning all of the mating surfaces that are going to be used today, so the skin and the ribs themselves. And then you need to cleco that whole assembly back together so that as you're working on a single rib, everything is nice and straight. That little stick that you see me using there is something that I saw somebody else do, and I just cut a couple notches in it that are about 1 inch wider than the span of that spar flange, or that rib flange rather, so that it kind of holds the top open a little bit as you lower the rib down into place. I think it's especially useful once you start putting the slop on there, because the idea is try to keep those surfaces from touching the skin versus the flanges until it's very near being seated. So got all of that put together, and then trying to tape up, learning from mistakes, at least messes anyways, trying to tape up all the screw holes so that they don't get glopped up, because it really is a pain in the butt to try to clean that stuff off if it's had time to set up. In total, I think it was 1.5 hours of prep before I started mixing up any sealant. And if you're paying attention closely, you might notice that I basically changed my operations there. Originally, I'd intended to start with one of the middle ribs and work my way out. And then I looked at the plans again, and the plans recommended starting with the outboard rib, not the last outboard rib, but the last interior outboard rib. So here we go, putting the slop on, and curious how this is going to work out. Yeah, the tricky thing about doing that is once you have that rib in your hand, you don't have a free hand to scoop sealant out of a cup or off of a little tray. Luckily, that stuff is so tacky that it won't pour out, so I was able to, like, with my ring finger and my pinky finger on the hand that was holding the rib, kind of grip the cup upside down and get stuff out. So into riveting already. I'll give a little, I won't give it away here, because I am going to do a little bit of a post game on this first rib. And that's what you see me doing, is just a single rib. I wasn't sure really what this process was going to be like. Getting those ribs lined up when you have light coming through the holes is one thing in terms of clecoing them in place. But when you get into this part and you've got the slop all over the flanges, you think you might be close to having the holes lined up, but you can't really tell. And I'll tell you what, man, the alignment worked out. That was not nearly as difficult as I thought it would be, getting into that. So finishing up the rib here by encapsulating all the rivet heads. And I think I told you before, I use a piece of fuel tubing, like rubber fuel tubing, to do that, because I have plenty of that laying around. And it seems to work just as well as using a piece of aluminum tubing, which I don't know how much of that I actually have to use. So yeah, a little cleanup afterwards. And then this is what it looks like when I have one rib installed. let's talk about it.
So one rib is in place. It was not as difficult as I expected it to be. From the time that I started spreading sealant on the flange until the time that I had all of that business done and put the sealant in the trash was about an hour and 15 minutes. So basically the entire installation except for just some cleanup afterwards. Not bad. I think I have enough patience to do one more today. I'm feeling pretty good about it and want to ride that feeling and not frustrate myself. This one is probably the easiest rib that I'm going to do because I have a lot of access right here to get my hand in there with the bucking bar. So we'll see how the next one goes.
Turns out on those interior ribs, there's plenty of room to get a bucking bar in there. Space isn't an issue. So for the second session, I decided to do something different, which is mix enough sealant for 2 ribs, with the idea that once I got one slopped up, I would run in the house and put the remaining sealant in the refrigerator to hold off this set time until I was ready to grab it again. It actually worked out pretty well. So I was able to get both of these ribs done in a total, I want to say, of about 2:15. So I think net, it probably saved me 30 or 45 minutes of doing separate cleanup and separate mixing. And just like the first rib, these two lined up pretty easily once I got them in there. It wasn't really hard to line up the rivet holes and get it going, so it went pretty smoothly. A couple of things that are interesting about this. One is the side I'm on right here is the lower side, and this is a little bit more difficult to buck the rivets because you have to work around the stiffeners in a few places. So it's helpful if you have a selection of bucking bars. My favorite bucking bar is a little bit too wide to fit in there by those stiffeners, so have a narrower one to get in those spots. The other thing that I wanted to share, a little pro tip, or we'll call them amateur tips. I'm sure you've noticed at this point that I have these pieces of like this indoor-outdoor carpet that I throw down on my workbenches, and you can see it on the bench in the background. Back there also, I have a glass of acetone, and what I found was really helpful was with my bucking bars or with the flush set on my rivet gun. When they got sloppy or I wanted to change the tape, I just dip the whole thing in that glass of acetone and scrub it on the surface of that carpet instead of messing around with rags. That carpet is pretty coarse and it's going to go in the trash eventually anyways. I mean, super helpful. Just dip it in the acetone, scrub it on there, and get on with your life. You're messy enough already. It's not going to matter that you've got a little patch of that carpet that is going to be dirtier than the rest. Let's see. Hot as hell again. The total for the day, I think I already said, was a little over 6 hours. And I got 3 ribs done, which honestly I think was more than I expected to get done at the beginning of the day. But even though this isn't strenuous work, my butt is kicked by the end of 6 or 7 hours in that garage in the heat. So today I'm going to get after it again and finish up this, which is the left tank, finish up the 2 remaining interior ribs in this tank and see if I can get 2 more done, at least 2 more done in the right tank. Cleanup is important, and don't be stingy with the acetone. If that rag is really saturated, it'll clean up really quickly. So here you go. 3 ribs installed. Episode 63 is in the can. Thanks for being here.